What if everything you think you know about the kingdom of heaven is keeping you from actually experiencing it? What if the very beliefs you hold most sacred about this divine realm are the walls preventing you from stepping into its reality right now, in this very moment? For centuries, we've been taught to look up when we talk about the kingdom of heaven. We point to the clouds, we imagine golden gates, we think of it as some distant destination we might reach if we're good enough, faithful enough, worthy enough. But here's the truth that changes everything. The kingdom of heaven was never meant to be a place you travel to after death. It's a state of consciousness you can access right here, right now, while you're sitting in your living room, stuck in traffic, or lying awake at night, wondering if there's more to life than what you're experiencing. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with all your heart, you try to live by every spiritual principle you've learned, yet somehow, that divine connection feels like it's always just out of reach. You feel like you're knocking on heaven's door, but nobody's answering. You're not alone in this experience, and more importantly, you're not doing anything wrong. The problem isn't your faith or your effort. The problem is that you've been searching for the kingdom in all the wrong places. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Edgar Cayce, one of the most thoroughly documented mystics of modern times, spent decades uncovering a truth so profound that it completely dismantles everything mainstream religion has taught us about the kingdom of heaven. Through thousands of documented readings and spiritual encounters, Casey discovered that when Jesus spoke about the kingdom, he wasn't describing a celestial country club reserved for the spiritually elite. He was revealing a present reality, a living dimension of consciousness that exists right where you are, woven into the very fabric of your awareness. Think about that for a moment. What if the kingdom of heaven isn't something you're waiting to enter someday? What if it's something you're already living in, but you simply haven't recognized it yet? This isn't some abstract, philosophical concept that sounds beautiful but has no practical application. This is about understanding a fundamental shift in perception that transforms how you experience every single aspect of your daily life. Stay with me here, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you understand your own spiritual power. The kingdom of heaven isn't hiding from you. It's not testing you or making you prove yourself worthy. It's been right here all along, closer than your own breath, waiting for you to stop looking outside yourself and recognize the divine presence that has never, not for one single moment, been absent from your experience. This isn't about religion as you've known it. This isn't about doctrine or ritual or believing the right things in the right way. This is about awakening to something that organized religion somehow managed to bury beneath centuries of misunderstanding. And what happens when you finally, truly understand what the kingdom of heaven actually is. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation because the shift in understanding we're talking about here isn't just theological. It's deeply personal and immediately transformative. Most people grew up with the same mental image of the kingdom of heaven, a distant paradise, a reward waiting at the end of a long life of faithfulness, something reserved for saints and mystics who somehow managed to transcend normal human existence. We were taught to think of it as somewhere else sometime later, for someone more worthy than we currently are. I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're going to continue diving deep into these truths that have the power to completely reshape your daily experience. This isn't about collecting spiritual information. It's about practical mysticism that actually works in real life, in your relationships, in your decisions, in the challenges you're facing right now. There's so much more we're going to explore together about living from this consciousness. But what if that entire framework is backwards? What if the kingdom isn't confined to some celestial realm beyond the clouds at all? What if it's actually a living, breathing presence available to you right now, woven into this very moment you're experiencing? This isn't just a philosophical distinction that sounds interesting but makes no practical difference. This fundamental shift in understanding changes everything about how you access spiritual power, how you make decisions, and how you navigate the challenges showing up in your daily life. Edgar Cayce didn't arrive at this revelation through abstract meditation or wishful thinking. He documented thousands of actual cases where ordinary people, not spiritual masters, not religious professionals, just regular individuals struggling with real problems, access this divine realm and experience what can only be described as miracles. We're talking about spontaneous healings that left medical professionals baffled, impossible situations that dissolved overnight in ways that defied logical explanation, a level of inner peace and clarity that seemed completely unreachable through conventional means, suddenly becoming the natural state of people who had spent years drowning in anxiety and confusion. These weren't isolated incidents or exaggerated stories passed down through generations. These were documented, witnessed transformations happening to people who had almost given up hope. The common thread wasn't their spiritual background or their level of devotion. The common thread was a single shift in perception about where the kingdom actually exists and how to access its power. Have you ever felt that gap between yourself and the divine? That sense that no matter how hard you pray, no matter how sincerely you seek, the connection feels distant, almost unreachable. You try to be good. You follow the rules, you show up to every service or practice. But somehow, that direct experience of spiritual power remains just beyond your grasp. If you're nodding along right now, you're in good company. For decades, Casey worked with people who felt exactly the same way. People who were doing everything they thought they were supposed to do, yet still felt separated from the divine presence they were seeking. The transformation didn't come from them trying harder or believing more intensely. It came from discovering one fundamental truth that changed their entire approach to spiritual life, a truth that makes the kingdom immediately accessible rather than perpetually distant. This hidden truth operates like a key that unlocks a door you didn't even know was right in front of you the whole time. Write in the comments, "I feel this truth," if something in what we've discussed so far is resonating with your own spiritual journey, because what we're about to explore next reveals exactly what that fundamental truth is and how it begins manifesting real, tangible changes in your everyday experience. Here's what makes this discovery so powerful. We're not talking about abstract theology that sounds beautiful in sermons, but has zero impact on your Monday morning when you're facing real problems with real consequences. This is practical mysticism, a way of understanding and accessing the kingdom that transforms your daily experience from limitation to limitless possibility. Imagine waking up each morning with a fundamentally different relationship to life itself, knowing that healing isn't something you have to beg for from a distant deity, that abundance isn't something you have to chase through exhausting effort, that peace isn't dependent on your circumstances finally aligning perfectly. This shift in perception creates a completely different operating system for how you navigate reality. Instead of approaching each day from a mindset of lack and struggle, you begin recognizing that you have access to a dimension of consciousness where these things already exist in their fullness. The journey isn't about creating something from nothing or convincing God to give you what you need. It's about recognizing what's already present and allowing it to express itself through your awareness and decisions. What Edgar Cayce revealed about Jesus completely transforms how we understand spiritual power and who has access to it. Jesus wasn't special, because he was fundamentally different from us, born with some divine advantage that you and I could never possess. He was special because he showed us what we are all capable of when we truly understand what the kingdom of heaven is and how to align ourselves with it. Every miracle he performed, every impossible situation he transformed, every life he touched, wasn't a demonstration of exclusive power. It was a demonstration of available power, a blueprint for what becomes possible when you recognize this divine realm and learn to operate from within it. Think about the profound implications of this for your own life. If Jesus was showing us a path rather than proving his uniqueness, then everything he accomplished reveals something about your potential, not just his. He demonstrated that the kingdom isn't reserved for the spiritually elite or those who somehow manage to be perfect enough to deserve it. It's accessible to everyone willing to shift their perception and recognize what's been there all along. Here's the part that might completely change how you see this entire topic. The kingdom of heaven isn't a physical location. It's not a place in the sky where good people go after they die. It's not a destination you're traveling toward through years of faithful service. The kingdom is a consciousness, a state of being, a dimension of divine presence that every single one of us can access right here, right now, in this very moment. This isn't metaphorical or symbolic language trying to make ancient concepts sound mystical. This is the literal truth about how spiritual reality actually works. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand, he wasn't saying it's coming soon or it's almost within reach if you try hard enough. He was saying it's right here, immediately available, as close as your own awareness. The transformation happens not through changing your location or waiting for the right time, but through changing your consciousness, through recognizing a reality that exists simultaneously with your physical experience, but operates on an entirely different frequency. Drop "I'm ready to see this" in the comments if you're beginning to sense how this understanding could transform the way you approach everything in your life. Because what happens when you actually start operating from this consciousness rather than just understanding it intellectually is where the real miracles begin to unfold. So the question becomes incredibly practical. How do you actually move from just understanding this intellectually to experiencing it in your life? Because knowledge without experience is just information taking up space in your mind. The shift happens when you realize that the kingdom isn't something you're waiting to enter someday, when you finally become good enough or spiritual enough. It's something you're living in right now, whether you recognize it or not. Your current experience is already happening within this divine consciousness. The only thing that changes is your awareness of it. Think about it like this. If you're standing in a room, but your eyes are closed, the room doesn't stop existing just because you can't see it. The furniture is still there, the walls are still there, everything is present even though you're not perceiving it. The moment you open your eyes, you don't create the room through your perception. You simply become aware of what was already surrounding you. This is exactly how the kingdom works. It's not absent from your life, waiting for you to deserve it or discover it. It's the actual reality you're moving through every single day, and awakening to it transforms everything about how you experience being alive. What Casey discovered through his extensive research and documentation fundamentally challenges the way we've been taught to see Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth wasn't born with some supernatural advantage that you don't have. He didn't arrive on earth with a divine cheat code programmed into his DNA. He was an ordinary man who achieved something extraordinary. He became so completely aligned with the kingdom of heaven, so utterly transparent to this divine consciousness, that his human limitations, all those fears, all that sense of separation from the divine, all those beliefs about what's possible and what's impossible, simply dissolved into pure spiritual awareness. This revelation changes everything about how you approach your own spiritual journey. If Jesus had been fundamentally different from you, born with abilities you could never access, then his life would be inspiring, but ultimately irrelevant to your actual experience. You'd be left admiring someone you could never emulate, worshipping power you could never touch. But if Jesus was just a man who discovered how to access the kingdom, then the path he walked is the exact same path available to you right now. This isn't about worshipping someone who was on a different level. This is about following the blueprint of someone who showed you exactly what's possible when you align with the kingdom that exists within your own consciousness. The impact of this understanding is profound because it removes the gap between you and spiritual power. You're not waiting for special dispensation from above. You're not hoping that maybe, if you pray hard enough or live well enough, the divine will notice you and grant you access. You're recognizing that access has always been present, that the kingdom has never been withheld from you, that the only barrier between where you are and where you want to be is a shift in perception. This changes my perspective in the comments if you're starting to see how this completely transforms what spiritual growth actually means and how accessible it really is, because understanding the mechanics of how Jesus actually operated from this consciousness reveals the practical steps you can take right now. Remember when Jesus said something that most people completely miss in their rush to focus on the miracles themselves? He said, "I can of mine own self do nothing." For centuries, we've glossed over these words, treating them as a nice expression of humility from a spiritual master. But these words contain the entire secret of how the kingdom's power actually operates in human experience. Jesus wasn't being modest or deflecting praise. He was revealing the fundamental mechanism behind every transformation he facilitated, behind every impossible situation that suddenly became possible in his presence. The human Jesus, the personality walking around in sandals, the individual with a specific name and history, wasn't performing the miracles through personal ability or supernatural talent. He had become completely transparent to the kingdom's presence flowing through him. Think about what transparency means in practical terms. When you look through a clean window, you don't see the glass itself. You see what's on the other side, because the glass isn't blocking your view. Jesus had so thoroughly dissolved his human sense of limitation, so completely released his identification with personal ego and individual power, that the kingdom could flow through him without obstruction. He wasn't using special abilities that were his alone. He wasn't accessing some exclusive divine power reserved for the chosen few. He was simply recognizing the perfection that was already present in every person who came to him seeking healing or transformation. When he looked at someone who was sick, he didn't see the disease as the ultimate reality. He saw through the appearance to the kingdom's truth, that in the realm of divine consciousness, this person had never been sick at all. That recognition itself became the catalyst for transformation, because he was operating from a dimension of reality where limitation doesn't exist. Here's what makes this immediately relevant to your life right now, in this exact moment. That same kingdom presence that flowed through Jesus 2,000 years ago exists within you, not as potential you might develop someday if you meditate enough or pray hard enough, not as something you have to earn by finally becoming good enough or pure enough or spiritual enough. It's already there, woven into the fabric of your being. It's your actual spiritual reality, and it remains perfect and whole regardless of what appears to be happening in your human experience. The transformation isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and false belief. The kingdom isn't waiting for you to qualify for it through years of dedicated spiritual practice. It's waiting for you to stop denying it, to stop insisting that you're just a limited human being struggling through life, and to recognize the divine consciousness that has been your true identity all along. Comment, I recognize this within me. If this revelation is starting to shift how you see yourself and your relationship too. Spiritual power, because understanding how this recognition begins manifesting as actual tangible changes in your daily decisions and circumstances is where everything becomes incredibly practical. Most spiritual teachings get this completely backwards, and that reversal keeps people trapped in an endless cycle of self-improvement that never quite delivers the transformation they're seeking. They tell you to work on yourself, to fix your flaws, to improve your character, to become worthy of divine favor through effort and dedication. But what Edgar Cayce discovered through decades of deep spiritual investigation turns that entire model upside down. The journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you've always been beneath the accumulated layers of conditioning, fear, and false identity. The kingdom isn't sitting somewhere waiting for you to finally qualify for entry after you've proven yourself worthy. It's waiting for you to stop denying it, to stop insisting that you're separate from it, to stop believing the story that you're just a limited human being who might someday, if you're lucky and work hard enough, gain access to divine power. That entire framework is the obstacle, not your current level of spiritual development. The transformation happens the precise moment you shift from seeking the kingdom outside yourself to recognizing the divine presence that has never, not for one single instant, been absent from your awareness. This isn't a gradual process of accumulation where you slowly build up enough spiritual credits to cash in for enlightenment. It's an immediate shift in perception that changes your entire relationship to reality. Every challenge you're facing right now, every obstacle that seems to be blocking your path, every limitation that feels so solid and permanent, none of these are barriers preventing you from entering the kingdom. They're invitations to demonstrate the kingdom that already lives within you. Think about the profound impact this understanding has on how you approach difficulties. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that you're not spiritual enough yet, that you haven't arrived at the kingdom, you begin recognizing them as opportunities to express the divine consciousness that's your true nature. That difficult relationship isn't proof that you're failing spiritually. It's an invitation for the kingdom's wisdom and love to flow through your responses and decisions. That financial pressure isn't a sign that you're being punished or that abundance has been withheld from you. It's an opportunity to operate from the consciousness of infinite supply that exists within the kingdom's dimension of reality. Jesus wasn't performing miracles to prove he was special or to demonstrate that he possessed abilities fundamentally different from what you have access to. Every healing, every impossible situation transformed, every demonstration of power over physical limitation, these weren't displays of exclusive supernatural ability. He was showing you what becomes possible when you stop identifying with your limitations and start recognizing the kingdom within. Each miracle was a demonstration of an available path, a blueprint for what happens when you transcend your human sense of self and operate from divine consciousness instead. Leave "The kingdom is already here" in the comments if you're beginning to grasp how this shift from seeking to recognizing changes absolutely everything about your spiritual journey, because when you understand how to actually make this recognition practical in your moment-to-moment decisions, the real transformation begins unfolding in ways you can see and measure. Here's what shifts everything into a completely different dimension of understanding. The kingdom isn't Jesus's exclusive domain. It's not a title that belonged to one exceptional person in history who somehow cornered the market on divine consciousness. The kingdom of heaven is a universal spiritual presence, a dimension of consciousness, a divine energy that flows through all existence without exception. It's not rationed or reserved for the spiritually advanced. It's available to anyone willing to transcend their limited human self-concept and embrace the truth of their divine nature. This means that every single moment of your ordinary day becomes charged with extraordinary potential. This isn't about religion anymore in the traditional sense of following rules or performing rituals or believing the right doctrines. This is about recognizing reality as it actually is, beneath the surface appearances that have convinced you that limitation is the only truth. Every single decision you make from the moment you wake up until you fall asleep at night is an opportunity to express the kingdom's consciousness through your choices and responses. When you choose love instead of fear in a tense moment, you're not just being a good person making a nice choice. You're demonstrating the kingdom within you. When you select peace over anxiety, even when circumstances seem to justify worry, you're not practicing positive thinking or emotional management. You're allowing the kingdom's presence to express itself through your state of being. When you operate from abundance consciousness instead of lack mentality, even when your bank account is telling you a different story, you're not being naive or irresponsible. You're aligning with the infinite supply that exists within the kingdom's dimension of reality. The impact of this understanding on your daily experience is profound because it removes the separation between your spiritual life and your regular life. There's no longer a division between sacred moments and mundane moments. Every interaction, every decision, every response becomes an opportunity for the kingdom to manifest through your awareness. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding for weeks, the one that makes your stomach tighten every time you think about it. That's not just a human problem requiring clever communication strategies. It's an invitation for the kingdom's wisdom and compassion to express itself through your words and presence. That financial decision, keeping you up at night, running scenarios over and over in your mind until you're exhausted, it's not just a matter of choosing the right option through careful analysis. It's an opportunity to operate from the kingdom's consciousness of infinite provision rather than from human fear of scarcity. That relationship challenge that feels absolutely impossible, where you can't see any way forward that doesn't result in pain. It's not just a complicated human situation requiring expert advice. It's an invitation for the kingdom to demonstrate what becomes possible when you stop approaching it from limitation and start approaching it from recognition of the infinite resource within you. Write, "I choose from the kingdom" in the comments. If you're beginning to see how this transforms not just your spiritual practice, but literally every decision and challenge you face. Because understanding how to anchor yourself in this consciousness throughout your day, especially when pressure hits, is where the practical application becomes incredibly powerful. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist, which is where so many people get confused when they first encounter these teachings. You're not being asked to deny reality or put on a fake smile while your world is falling apart. You're being invited to recognize that beneath every human appearance, no matter how solid or permanent it seems, there's a spiritual reality that's already perfect, already whole, already complete. When you align your awareness with that deeper truth, when you start making decisions from the kingdom's consciousness rather than from fear or lack, everything in your external experience begins to shift and reorganize itself to match your internal state. The mechanism behind this transformation is subtle but incredibly powerful. You're not forcing change through willpower or manipulating circumstances through mental tricks. You're simply allowing what's already spiritually true to manifest in your human experience by removing the mental obstacles that have been blocking it. Think about how most people were taught to pray, probably including yourself. We learned to approach prayer as a form of asking, really begging if We're honest about it, for divine intervention from somewhere outside ourselves. We pray to a God in the sky, hoping our requests make it through, hoping we're worthy enough to be heard, hoping that maybe this time we'll get what we're asking for. But when you truly understand that the kingdom lives as your actual being, not as something separate from you, but as the very consciousness through which you exist, prayer becomes something entirely different. It transforms from petition into recognition. You're not trying to get God's attention anymore because you realize that divine attention has never been withdrawn. You're not hoping to bridge some impossible gap between yourself and the sacred because you're recognizing that the gap was never real. You're awakening to the divine presence that has never, not for one single moment, been absent from your awareness. This shift in how you pray changes your entire relationship with spiritual power because you're no longer coming from a place of separation and lack. You're operating from unity and wholeness. You become what Edgar Cayce called a transparency for the kingdom. And this concept is crucial to understand because it explains how divine power actually flows into human experience. Like a clear window that light passes through without obstruction or distortion, you're not the source of the healing power or the transformative energy. You're not personally making miracles happen through your own abilities or spiritual advancement. You're simply getting your human opinions, your accumulated fears, your conditioned limited thinking out of the way so that the kingdom's presence can flow through your consciousness unobstructed. This is why trying harder doesn't work in spiritual transformation. Adding more effort just creates more obstruction. The journey is about subtraction, not addition, removing the barriers rather than building up personal power. When you stop interfering with the kingdom's natural flow, through your awareness, when you become genuinely transparent to this divine presence, remarkable things begin happening in ways that your logical mind could never have orchestrated or predicted. Type, "I am becoming transparent" in the comments if this understanding of how spiritual power actually works is resonating with your own experience or changing how you see your role in transformation. Because recognizing what actually blocks this transparency and how to work with those obstacles compassionately is essential to making this sustainable in daily life. What we're talking about here goes deeper than just changing your thoughts or adopting new beliefs. This involves a fundamental shift in identity itself, in how you understand who and what you actually are at the core of your being. You stop seeing yourself as a human being who occasionally has spiritual experiences when you meditate or pray. That entire framework flips completely. You begin recognizing yourself as spiritual, being appearing in human form, as the kingdom expressing itself through individual awareness and experience. This identity shift is the difference between tourism and residence. Most people approach spirituality like tourists visiting a foreign country. They have amazing experiences. They feel transformed in the moment, but then they return to their real life as a regular human being. But what Casey discovered is that you're not a visitor to the kingdom. You're a resident. The kingdom isn't a place you go for special experiences. It's where you already live, and the human experience is happening within it, not separate from it. Here's what makes this so different from conventional spiritual teaching. Most people spend their entire lives trying to become more spiritual, accumulating practices and techniques, working on their character flaws, trying to earn divine favor through dedication and effort. They're on a perpetual journey of self-improvement that never quite reaches its destination because there's always something more to fix, something else to develop, another level to achieve. But this identity shift reveals something that changes the entire trajectory of your spiritual journey. You're not trying to become something you're not. You're simply recognizing what you've always been beneath the layers of social conditioning, inherited beliefs, and false identity. The spiritual perfection isn't something you're building toward in the future. It's your present reality, waiting to be recognized and expressed through your daily choices and awareness. This recognition doesn't make you arrogant or disconnected from the challenges of human life. It actually makes you more effective at navigating those challenges because you're no longer approaching them from a mindset of powerlessness and victimhood. Every challenge that shows up in your life stops being an obstacle blocking your path and becomes an invitation, an opportunity to demonstrate the kingdom that lives within you. That difficult boss who makes every workday feel like torture isn't just a problem to endure or escape from. It's an invitation for the kingdom's wisdom and patience to express itself through your responses. That health concern that keeps you awake at night with worry isn't just a medical issue requiring treatment. It's an opportunity for the kingdom's wholeness to manifest in your physical experience. That financial pressure that makes you feel trapped and anxious isn't just a budgeting problem requiring better planning. It's a chance for the kingdom's infinite abundance consciousness to replace your human scarcity thinking. These aren't random problems the universe is throwing at you to test your faith or punish your mistakes. They're specific opportunities for the divine power within you to demonstrate itself through your transformed consciousness and decision-making. The shift happens when you start seeing them that way, when you approach each challenge not as a victim, but as the kingdom itself expressing in individual form. Leave "I am the kingdom" expressing in the comments if this shift in how you see yourself and your challenges is beginning to click, because understanding how to actually maintain this identity consistently, especially when circumstances seem to contradict it, is where the real spiritual work happens and where the visible transformation accelerates. Now, I want to share something that moves this from beautiful theory into documented reality, because what Edgar Cayce recorded over decades of working with thousands of people provides concrete evidence that this isn't wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. He documented case after case of genuine, verifiable healings and transformations that occurred when people caught even a glimpse of the kingdom within them. These weren't spiritual masters with decades of practice. These weren't people born with special abilities or mystical gifts. They were ordinary individuals, facing extraordinary challenges, who simply recognized, even for a fleeting moment, the divine presence that lived within them. The evidence is remarkable when you actually look at what happened in these documented cases. Cancer that doctors had declared terminal, giving patients weeks or months to live, simply disappeared from their bodies with no medical explanation. Relationships that had been fractured and hostile for decades suddenly healed, with estranged family members reconciling in ways that seemed impossible just days before. Financial lack that had dominated entire family lineages for generations transformed into abundance, with opportunities and resources appearing from directions no one could have predicted or planned. What makes these transformations so significant is understanding what actually caused them. None of these changes came through human effort or willpower. The people involved weren't working harder or trying to force outcomes through positive thinking. They weren't manipulating circumstances or using clever strategies. These transformations happened through simple recognition of what had always been spiritually true beneath the surface appearance. When someone recognized, even briefly, that the kingdom's reality within them had never been sick, that divine wholeness was their actual spiritual identity, their physical condition began reorganizing itself to match that inner truth. This is where understanding the difference between appearance and reality becomes crucial to your own transformation. Every condition in your life right now that seems solid, permanent, unchangeable, that diagnosis, that broken relationship, that financial situation, that addiction, that limitation you've been living with for years, it's only an appearance. It's real in the dimension of human experience, absolutely. You're not being asked to deny what you're experiencing or pretend it doesn't exist. But beneath that appearance is the kingdom's reality that has never been sick, never been lacking, never been broken, never been limited. If this resonates with you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because there's so much more we're unpacking about how to actually live from the kingdom in your everyday life. We're exploring practical spirituality that transforms how you experience being alive, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you stay connected to this journey we're on together. When you recognize this truth and hold that recognition steadily, not letting the appearance convince you that limitation is the only reality, the kingdom's power begins working in your experience. This isn't magic or denial. It's understanding that consciousness creates circumstances. And when your consciousness shifts from identifying with the appearance to recognizing the underlying spiritual truth, your external reality gradually aligns with that inner knowing. The transformation doesn't always happen instantly, though sometimes it does. But the shift begins the moment recognition penetrates deeply enough into your awareness. Put "recognition is my power" in the comments if you're starting to understand how this works differently than anything you've tried before, because learning how to maintain this recognition consistently, especially when appearances seem overwhelming, is the practical skill that separates those who just understand these principles from those who actually experience transformation in their daily lives. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates how this recognition works in real life, because hearing about principles is one thing, but seeing how they actually transform someone's experience makes everything click into place. There was a woman who carried 15 years of resentment toward her ex-husband like a weight she couldn't put down. This wasn't casual annoyance. This was deep, bone-level bitterness that had shaped her entire emotional landscape and poisoned every relationship that came after. She had tried everything the conventional world offers: years of therapy sessions that went nowhere, forgiveness exercises that felt hollow and forced, even medication for the depression that had settled into her life like permanent fog. Nothing touched the core of her anger. Then she encountered this truth about the kingdom of heaven, and something fundamental shifted in her awareness. She suddenly realized that holding on to this resentment wasn't just hurting her emotionally, it was actually denying the kingdom's presence in both herself and her former spouse. Every time she rehearsed his failures, every time she justified her bitterness, she was essentially saying that human behavior was more real and more powerful than the divine reality that existed beneath it all. Here's where the story becomes remarkable and demonstrates the actual power of this recognition. Within 3 weeks of this shift in consciousness, not 3 years, not 3 months, but 3 weeks, her ex-husband called her unexpectedly. He apologized for years of painful behavior with genuine remorse and asked for her forgiveness. The conversation that might have been awkward or hostile just a month earlier flowed naturally from a place of authentic understanding. 15 years of accumulated bitterness dissolved in a single conversation because her consciousness had shifted to recognize the kingdom in both of them. This wasn't about him suddenly becoming a better person through coincidence. This was about her recognition of the kingdom, changing the entire energetic dynamic between them, creating space for transformation that couldn't exist while she was locked into seeing him only through the lens of past hurt. The external change followed the internal shift, not the other way around. Another story reveals how this works in completely different circumstances. A businessman arrived at one of Casey's retreats as an absolute last resort, facing bankruptcy after exhausting every human solution he could find. This wasn't someone who'd been careless or lazy. He had consulted experts, changed strategies, worked impossible hours trying to save what he'd built over decades. Nothing was working, and he was preparing mentally to lose everything he had worked for his entire adult life. Then something shifted in how he understood abundance and where it actually comes from. Instead of waking up each morning in panic mode, desperately chasing new clients with that energy of desperation that potential customers can sense immediately, he began acknowledging the kingdom's presence within himself and within every person he encountered. His entire approach to business transformed not because he learned new techniques, but because he was operating from a completely different consciousness. Comment. Consciousness creates my reality. If these stories are helping you see how recognition of the kingdom manifests as actual, tangible changes in circumstances, because understanding what happens when you apply this same principle to the specific challenges you're facing right now is where this becomes deeply personal and immediately practical. Within just 2 months of this shift in consciousness, 3 major contracts appeared in his business, seemingly out of nowhere. Companies that had never responded to his proposals before suddenly wanted to work with him. Clients who had gone silent for years reached out with new projects. His business didn't just survive the crisis, it thrived beyond anything he had experienced in the previous 2 decades. And here's what's crucial to understand. His strategy hadn't changed, his services were the same, his pricing was identical. The only difference was consciousness itself. When he shifted from seeing himself as a struggling businessman trying to survive in a competitive market to recognizing himself as the kingdom expressing itself through business activities, everything in his external world reorganized to match that internal reality. This demonstrates something profound about how reality actually works. We've been taught to believe that you change your circumstances through better strategies and harder work. And while those things have their place, they're not addressing the fundamental creative force behind your experience. Consciousness creates circumstances. When consciousness shifts at a deep enough level, circumstances rearrange themselves to reflect that new internal state, often in ways that seem impossible or miraculous from a purely logical perspective. Let me share another story that hits even closer to home for many people because it involves one of the most painful experiences a parent can face. A mother watched her teenage son spiral into drug addiction, and it felt like watching someone she loved disappear right in front of her eyes. Every human intervention had failed. Counselors who seemed promising at first made no lasting impact. Rehab programs that cost thousands of dollars ended with him using again within weeks of returning home. The tough love approach that well-meaning friends recommended only seemed to push him further away. She was losing her son to this addiction, and nothing she tried was making any difference. Through Edgar Cayce's teachings, she discovered something that challenged everything she thought she knew about helping someone in crisis. She learned to stop seeing her son as an addict, not to pretend the addiction wasn't real or dangerous, but to stop letting that label define her perception of who he truly was. She began recognizing his perfect kingdom identity beneath the human chaos and confusion. This is such an important distinction because it's easy to misunderstand what this recognition actually means in practice. She didn't ignore the addiction or enable his destructive behavior. She still set firm boundaries. She still refused to give him money that would go toward drugs. She still held him accountable for his choices and their consequences, but internally, in her own consciousness, she held steadfast to the truth that beneath this addiction was a perfect spiritual being, temporarily lost in human confusion and pain. She recognized the kingdom as his true identity, even when he had completely forgotten it himself, even when every external appearance screamed the opposite. Type "I see beyond appearances" in the comments if this approach to challenging Situations is shifting how you think about the people and problems in your own life, because understanding what actually happened as she maintained this recognition reveals the hidden mechanism behind how consciousness affects not just your own experience, but the experiences of those around you. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and there were setbacks along the way, moments when it seemed like nothing was changing. But the shift proved profound in ways that went beyond just behavioral change. Her son began making different decisions, small ones at first that gradually built momentum. He sought help voluntarily rather than being forced into another program. He started reconnecting with family members he had pushed away during his addiction. The anger and defensiveness that had characterized all their interactions began softening into genuine conversation. Years later, after his recovery had stabilized and he had rebuilt his life, he told his mother something remarkable that reveals the hidden power of recognition. He said he could feel something different in how she looked at him during those darkest months, even when he was too lost in addiction to articulate what that difference was. While everyone else looked at him with disappointment, pity, or judgment, seeing only the addict and the destruction he was causing, she looked at him with something else entirely. She looked at him with recognition of who he truly was beneath the addiction. That recognition, he told her, helped him remember his true identity when he had completely lost himself in the chaos. This brings us to the practical question that matters most. How do you actually make this recognition a consistent part of your daily life rather than just an inspiring idea you heard once? The transformation moves from theory into lived experience when you establish a daily practice that anchors you in kingdom consciousness before you engage with the world's demands and challenges. Every morning, before you reach for your phone or start worrying about your to-do list, before you engage with the day's problems or check your email or dive into whatever crisis feels most urgent, you need to establish your consciousness in the kingdom first. You acknowledge this divine presence as your true being, you recognize your identity as the kingdom expressing itself in individual form, and then you address material concerns from that foundation rather than the other way around. Think about how most people start their day. They wake up already in reaction mode, already identifying with their problems, already operating from limitation before they've even gotten out of bed. But when you begin each morning with recognition of your spiritual identity, you're setting the tone for everything that follows. You're establishing which consciousness you'll be operating from throughout the day. Edgar Cayce taught a specific practice that makes this recognition practical and accessible, something he called the listening ear. And this practice reverses everything most of us learned about spiritual communication. Most of us have spent our entire lives talking to God, presenting our problems, asking for things, essentially treating prayer like a wish list we're submitting to some cosmic customer service department. But Casey discovered that real spiritual guidance, the kind that actually transforms your daily experience, comes when you reverse that entire dynamic. Instead of constantly talking, instead of filling every moment with your requests and concerns, you learn to be still and listen for the voice of the kingdom speaking within your own consciousness. Leave "I'm learning to listen" in the comments if you're willing to try this practice, because what happens when you combine this listening with recognition throughout your day creates a momentum that changes everything about how you navigate life's challenges and decisions. This isn't about hearing audible words or waiting for some dramatic supernatural experience. Start with just 5 minutes of complete silence each morning, and I mean genuine silence, where you're not asking for anything, not trying to solve your problems, not even trying to be spiritual or do it right. You're simply listening with your whole being, creating space for something beyond your usual mental chatter to emerge. At first, your mind will probably be chaotic. You'll hear endless mental commentary, random thoughts bouncing around, that constant internal dialogue that usually dominates your awareness without you even noticing it. But if you stay with this practice consistently, not judging the noise or fighting it, just returning gently to listening whenever you notice you've gotten caught up in thought. Something begins to shift. Gradually, you'll start sensing a deeper presence beneath all that mental noise. It's subtle at first, easy to miss if you're expecting something dramatic, but it's there, a quietness that isn't empty but full, a stillness that feels alive and intelligent. This is the kingdom communicating with your receptive awareness, offering guidance that your busy mind usually drowns out completely. The impact of this simple practice on your decision-making throughout the day is remarkable. Instead of agonizing over choices, running endless scenarios in your mind, polling everyone you know for their opinions, or relying solely on logical analysis that often leaves you more confused than when you started, you learn to consult the divine intelligence within you. The answers that emerge through this listening are often surprising, sometimes challenging your assumptions and contradicting what seems logical from a human perspective, but they consistently lead toward outcomes that serve your highest good, even when your limited view can't see how. What begins happening as you develop this practice is that your entire relationship to life transforms from the ground up. This journey we've been exploring together isn't just theoretical knowledge to add to your spiritual collection, another interesting concept to think about occasionally when you remember. It's an invitation to fundamentally transform how you experience every single day of your life, every interaction, every challenge, every decision. You are no longer a human being seeking the kingdom, trying desperately to bridge some impossible gap between yourself and the divine. You are the kingdom expressing itself as human being, and this truth, when you truly recognize it and live from it consistently, sets you free forever from the limitations that have been defining your experience. This freedom doesn't mean problems disappear or life becomes effortless. It means you stop being victimized by circumstances. You stop feeling like life is happening to you randomly and you're just trying to survive it. You begin recognizing that you're operating from a dimension of consciousness where divine power is accessible, where infinite resources are available, where transformation is always possible regardless of how solid the limitations appear. Write, "The kingdom is my true nature," in the comments if this entire journey we've walked through together is beginning to shift something fundamental in how you see yourself and your relationship to spiritual power. Because understanding how to navigate the obstacles that will inevitably arise as you begin living from this consciousness is essential to making this sustainable, rather than just another spiritual high that fades when challenges hit. If you've made it all the way here with me, I want you to know that your presence matters. The fact that you stayed through this entire exploration tells me you're ready for something more than surface-level spirituality. You're ready to actually experience the kingdom, rather than just learn about it, and that readiness is the first step toward genuine transformation. I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're going to continue diving deep into these truths that have the power to completely reshape your daily experience. This isn't about collecting spiritual information. It's about practical mysticism that actually works in real life, in your relationships, in your decisions, in the challenges you're facing right now. There's so much more we're going to explore together about living from this consciousness in a world that desperately needs people who understand these principles. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," so I know you made it all the way through, because knowing that these teachings are landing with people who are genuinely ready to apply them keeps this work alive and growing. Your engagement isn't just a number, it's confirmation that this ancient wisdom is finding the people it's meant to reach. And if this content resonated with you, if something shifted in your awareness as we walk through these revelations together, go ahead and hit that like A button. It helps this message reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how the kingdom transforms your daily experience in ways you might not expect. Click and continue with me over there. The journey is just beginning, and I'm grateful you're walking it with awareness and intention.